Adam, a good time for us to kind of say here on the podcast as we head in towards the fall, we're going to be booking more guests here on the podcast. We're going to start getting some more diverse voices on here, tapping into your resources over at LSR and Legal Sports Report to have more people come in on some stories that they have worked on some research that they have worked on, and all of that. And I know everyone loves just listening to me and you. I've gotten the feedback. I hear it all the time, just how much they love listening to just me and you. But we said, you know what we're going to do? You're going to love listening to the two of us and a third person.
To be clear, what they have said, Matt, is we were so tired of listening to Dustin Gauker.
Yes.
It's such a relief to only listen to your dulcet tones, Matt Brown and Adam Candee. Thank God that Gwerker guy is gone.
That's pretty much what happened. If you're listening, Dustin, that we only got one email that said that. That's it. So don't worry about it. We're going to talk about some M&A here, a little bit of M&A. We're going to talk about what's going on in D.C. Good news for you guys over there. An interesting story coming out of the U.K. But, Adam, this I kind of usually hear scuttlebutt and stuff and whatever in the industry. I know you do as well. But then this story that we're leading off with kind of hit me out of nowhere. I was like, I thought something like this I would have heard. I would have heard some rumors. I would have heard whatever. But I'm sure it was, since we didn't talk about it off air, I can only imagine it was kind of a shocker to you too.
The fact that something big was coming in our space via court was something that had been teased a bit on social media, but what it ultimately became in the last 24 hours was in no way expected by any of us in the sports betting space. And I'll start the discussion of Jacobs v. DraftKings v. Spanky with this. If you want all the details of the filings here, go to legalsportsreport.com. Matthew Waters wrote up the initial filing by Stephen Jacobs. He will, by the time this posts, he will have written up Spanky's long and detailed response to this, and you'll get all of that situation laid out in front of you. Now, let's give you the basics of this. A lawyer in New York named Stephen Jacobs filed a lawsuit against DraftKings alleging that DraftKings conspired with Spanky. And if you are out there on sports betting Twitter, you know that he is a professional bettor who makes his voice quite loud at times on Twitter. And the accusation in here is that DraftKings leaked personal information about Jacobs to Spanky and an associate of Spanky, and then Jacobs was allegedly threatened by a masked person saying that he owed Spanky $500,000 and that he would be killed if he did not pay up. Now, this lived out there for most of the day before Spanky put out a long and detailed response, and the crux of his response is that my associate and I identified this guy as a potential beard for us, right? We identified him as someone we could use to get money down at DraftKings in large quantities because Spanky himself is banned at DraftKings, something that he openly discusses in that long Twitter thread.
Yeah, and this is not new, by the way. Yeah, to anyone that's kind of paid attention to him over the years, like it's almost a badge of honor, of the different places that he's been limited or banned and whatever and stuff like that.
It is, and it's not just about DraftKings; it's about a number of legal sportsbooks. So I'll leave the details of it there, Matt, and we'll get more into discussing this case, I'm sure, as it continues its way through the court system or doesn't, because DraftKings has already moved for it to be dismissed this week. We'll see what ultimately becomes of that. But Spanky's accusation is essentially, this guy got himself deep into debt and is suing as a way to try to get himself out of what he owes me and my associate, which is more than $1 million. It's a wild case. There's a lot to unpack in here. But, Matt, I think what you and I will ultimately get into discussing here is this is the strongest evidence in the, in the spotlight, in the daylight that we have seen of the games that professional bettors play in terms of trying to find beards or people that they can use whose hands are clean to get money down at sportsbooks where they've been banned.
Yeah, so if you guys don't know how this works, sometimes you will hear a lot of these dudes that are, not only just single operation, syndicates, et cetera, look for outs. They will be, hey, how many outs do you have? How can we get a hold of those? Is there anything we can do to kind of partner up and stuff like that? Of course, there's a vetting process that goes along because, Adam, as you well know, if someone comes in and they are, and if they're freshly out of college and haven't had a real job yet or anything like that, like that is going to blow up all the KYC stuff that happens on, within these sports books, and you're not going to be able to get down any money. That person is useless to a syndicate or to a guy like Spanky or whatever it might be. So you actually have to go find people who, whenever there is some work done within the sports books, that it kind of all checks out, right? They've got income, they've got disposable income, they have whatever, et cetera. So it is a process, and it is like, it's a little bit more elaborate, I think, than a lot of people even want to acknowledge. It's just, there's some sophistication that goes on in all this stuff. I know that there's this almost like Hollywood thought of what a professional gambler and professional bettor looks like and how they act and whatever, but like that's not present day, and that's not really what goes on with all this. These guys are grinding spreadsheets and grinding algorithms and have bots that are giving them information, also like that. And then the other side of the business is what you just mentioned, is actually just finding ways to get the money down, right? I mean, that's like the other biggest thing, is being able to get down the volume and the amount that they're looking to get down when it's all said and done. And so, as you mentioned, this is kind of the first time we knew it anyway. And honestly, most of them are not shy about talking about it either, right? I mean, like this is something that is just, it's kind of like hidden in plain sight, like everybody knows it's happening. They talk about it, but you don't really hear and see stories and stuff about it. But as you mentioned, this is kind of the first time where we up close and personal get a look at this. No, this is a guy that we used because it all checked out with him, and it was a dude that, we were able to get down decent money with because it looked like he was able to afford to make these bets.
I would point, actually, Matt, to something that your friend and mine, Gil Alexander, had on the VSiN airwaves a little while back, where he has regular appearances by Bill Krackomberger, a guy who's well known, I think, from the Action documentary, and also to anyone who pays attention to media in the sports betting space. And Bill gave a pretty impassioned speech on Gil's airwaves there to say, you keep trying to ban us, we'll just keep finding beards. We'll keep finding new people. That's just part of the game. And it is an open discussion and an open cat and mouse game between the sports books, and not always just the legal sports books, right? It can be at the offshores as well. This is not a problem that's unique to U.S. or anywhere else's legal sports books.
Point.
This is something that goes on everywhere. It's not something that we say, oh, well, the legal market is unique to this. No, it's not the case at all. So we will see what ultimately plays out here in court. I think the most interesting part is that, I posed this question to some legal folks to say, is Spanky in some way incriminating himself in something that, he shouldn't be doing? And, would it be potentially against the law in some way? The initial reactions I got were that no, it wouldn't be. And of course, why would he be out there incriminating himself? It would be hubris to do that. It would be more about the violation of terms of service at DraftKings. And guess what? Not particularly concerned about that, right? Like, that is not his number one worry, because if you were worried about that, you wouldn't be doing it in the first place. Is just another example of, Matt, why we talk about the fact that limiting, as we've discussed on the last couple of podcasts, limiting and banning is such a hot topic among the sports betting Twitter, among the legal folks, among the regulatory folks. And we know that the Massachusetts Gaming Commission is going to come back to this topic in August. We talked about that on the last podcast. One of the first times that we've seen U.S. state-level regulators try to get themselves involved in the discussion in some way of how legal operators go about this. Matt, you tell me, I have to feel like a situation like this will only help the sportsbooks in their case for saying, hey, this is a real problem for us. There's only so much that we can talk about because we're dealing with these high-level things that are a major threat to our bottom line. Whether that's true or not is for someone else to parse out. I'm just thinking from the PR perspective.
Yeah, and you bring up Bill and Spanky. They're two of the biggest voices about the whole limiting and banning thing and stuff like that. And Adam, honestly, I like their position on it too, because there needs to be that voice, right? There needs to be those people who are saying like, well, here's the links that I have to go to in order to be able to bet legally inside the United States, right? So I think that I like their side too, because they're giving you firsthand experiences and all these things. And as we've also mentioned, it can't just be a free for all. So we understand somewhat what the sportsbook side of all of this is. And it is why whenever we talked about this last week, I honestly believe this is going to be ongoing, is going to be the hardest discussion for us to have in this industry, because there is at least a general consensus amongst how should advertising be handled? What should and shouldn't be said? How do we go about this? What's the frequency that makes sense? Like, yeah, there's a little bit of debate there, Adam, but there's a general consensus on how that should go. Like all these other hot topics, you kind of get to where there's some sort of middle ground. Whereas this, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know the right answer, because as Bill, you said, goes on Gil's show and says, or Spanky, you see in this type of deal, if you want me to bet legally in the United States, you don't want me offshore, you don't want me bookies, stuff like that, then I got to find somebody that I can get money down, because you won't let me get money down. And so it just becomes this incredible circle that we're going to go through. And I do believe at some point there will be the states stepping in on something like this. I don't know if that's anytime soon, but I do believe at some point there's going to be the state stepping in and say, listen, if you're going to offer betting, you've got to at least offer X amount to every person that comes in, because this is not just, we're not going to let you have one-way traffic on all this, right? Like this isn't, while we understand there are choices out there, if you guys are all doing the same thing, there's really no choice.
And don't think that this is something that is, magnanimous by the states to promote clean business.
Yeah.
They have an interest in this.
Yes.
They want to get as much revenue in for their tax collection as possible. Why else would they choose to regulate beyond what we've already discussed with responsible gaming and the ability to better track bettors and the ability to potentially help problem bettors? That is a real thing. But it is also a real thing that they want to maximize the tax revenue that they're getting out of legalizing sports betting. And if large dollar bettors are clearly saying, hey, I'm not playing in the legal market because I can't get any money down, that is a voice that has to be listened to, much the same as it is the sportsbook voice that needs to be listened to when they say, yeah, these guys are using all sorts of avenues that might potentially go against our rules for how they get their money down. I'm not telling you anybody is right. That is a much, much larger discussion for another day, and there probably has to be a solution that lands somewhere in between those two extremes.
It is. It's fascinating and something that I know we're going to talk about, all the time here on the podcast.